Hi everyone, it's Kable here. I'm super tired recording this, so I don't know why I'm recording this in the first place, but it is time for a review of this new-ish chording album, New Last Name. This is the sophomore full-length studio album from Liverpool-based indie rock outfit Chording. Now, this album was released back in January of this year, so it's not exactly new, but I was interested in doing a review of this album because I feel like I might add something interesting to the discussion, or at least I hope that's what I'll accomplish with this review. Now, since this album's release, it has gained a very mixed response from many music fans, and I think to better understand why that is, it's worth going back to 2022 when Chording dropped their debut full-length album, Guitar Music. Now, while this album right here hasn't seen the same level of acclaim as many other UK-based experimental rock/punk albums over the last few years, it did make Chording an artist to keep your eyes on. Me personally, I listened to Guitar Music back when it first dropped, and while it wasn't one of my favorite albums from 2022, I did still walk away from that album enjoying it a good deal. Essentially what Chording did on this first album right here is blend indie rock and post-punk with elements of electronic and glitch music. Maybe not the most novel thing ever, but they did pull it off pretty well, and if I will sing high praise towards this album for one thing, it's that the very Britpop-influenced sixth track, Jumper, is honestly a contender for one of, if not my favorite song from 2022. It's catchy, it's in your face, and much of the production choices on that track felt very tasteful, at least in my opinion. So with that background out of the way, fast forward to this year, they dropped a new album, New Last Name, and like I said, the response has been overall more mixed. And I think that all has to do with a huge stylistic change-up in sound. Rather than the experimental punk stylings that made up the debut, New Last Name takes way more influences from 2000s era indie pop and post-punk revival, which admittedly were influences on the debut, but here they're much more amplified. Now, if any of y'all watched Fantano's mini-review of this album, he mentioned that this album sounds like the 1975 if they had crappier production value. Now, full disclosure, I haven't heard any of the 1975's output as of me writing this review, but another band that was brought up to me as a comparison point was The Strokes. That is, The Strokes if they were more fucked up. And yeah, I can definitely hear that in the album at points. Going more in depth on the production on this album and my feelings on it, I will actually argue that it's overall fine for the most part. I wouldn't say it's as creative as it was on the debut, but there are moments that shine, especially within the back half of the album. My only problem with the overall sound of the album is that the vocalists use a whole lot of autotune. Like, nearly every song, if not every song on this album, uses autotune to some extent. And for the most part, I feel like that wasn't really necessary. Sure, the debut also had moments of autotune usage, but like I said, I feel like there was done more creatively and also perhaps used more sparingly. Maybe that's because on there, the vocalist was doing a lot of talk singing, but yeah. Now, I'm not really sure if I want to highlight specific songs on this album because I feel like most of my critiques can be boiled down to the production quirks, which I already discussed. And I guess my other biggest issue with these songs is that, well, for the most part, they don't really stick in my head all that much. I guess to some extent I could lobby this critique at much of Guitar Music, but I feel like the creativity factor on there helps to balance the issue in the other direction. I will say there are some interesting moments on New Last Name. The song The Hills has this Midwest emo tinge to its structure, and I think it could have been one of the best songs on the album if it weren't for the issues already stated. The penultimate track, Happy Endings, has some pretty crazy production moments in the bridge, making for probably my favorite song on the album. I'll also say that the closing track, America, is also pretty great. However, besides that, I don't really have a whole lot to say. None of the songs are what I'd call bad. They're still decently catchy, but at the same time, I doubt that much of this album will stay in my mind going forward. Now, I am aware that Chording recorded both Guitar Music and New Last Name at roughly the same time, and decided to put them out separately to see which style people like more. And I think, judging by the reception of this album right here, I think Courting are going to stick to the more experimental punk stuff going forward. But I would honestly like to see them expand this sound too. Maybe by combining these two styles, they could create something even better than either album. I'm honestly not sure, but I am admittedly still curious as to what this group will do next. So, yeah, I did like this album, which is definitely a bit unusual given the mixed response that this album has received, but I didn't necessarily love it either. I normally don't give out scores for these reviews, but I honestly don't know how else to conclude this, so I'm feeling like I don't know, decent 7 on this album. Tran. And yeah, that's basically my thoughts on this album. I hope y'all enjoyed the review, and I'll see y'all later. Bye!